everyone. I hope your day is off to a fabulous start. Welcome to this 2023 July webinar sponsored by WiseHive, Engaging Employees and Delivering Social Impact, the Power of Volunteering. My name's Allie Murphy. I'm the Director of Events and Program Development at Engage for Good. And in today's webinar, you're going to learn how workplace volunteer programs can activate a culture of giving and social impact, the unprecedented impact that these programs can have on employee engagement, and the synergistic effect of combining workplace giving with volunteering. And with that, it is my pleasure to hand it over to WiseHive's David Grubman. David, take it away.
Thanks, Allie. I was so excited to be here and so excited to be able to talk on this topic. I want to quickly introduce myself and our panelists, and then really the focus of the conversations today is going to be about the amazing work that Kate is doing at Campbell Soup and Ben has been doing with WeHero about volunteering programs. So first, the panelists that we have today are Kate Barrett, president of Campbell Soup Foundation, Ben Sampson, the co-founder and CEO of WeHero, and myself, David Grubman, with WiseHive. So to start with, we're going to go through a pretty robust and dynamic conversation about the programs that Kate's running and with her company and what Ben's seeing in the industry overall. But I'd like to start with, it's more valuable when you have the context for what their background is and what their programs look like. So I want to start with Kate. Would love to get an understanding of the work you've been doing with Campbell Soup. But wait, before you do that, I have to call out the one story. I live in California, but I traveled to Toledo, Ohio, to visit my sister, and I was in a restaurant one day and a bunch of folks came in with Campbell's Cares shirts on, and I was so excited for the work that we've been doing with Campbell Soup to see those folks, and I think they felt it an intrusion for me to stop by their table, but was so excited to see that in the field. But Kate, would love to have you share details about the program that you guys offer.
Great. Thanks, David. And hi, everybody. Kate Barrett. I serve as the president of the Campbell Soup Foundation, as David mentioned, and also just the director of our community affairs team. So just briefly, kind of within the scope of community affairs for us, very much includes all of our employee engagement work, giving and volunteerism, but also includes our grant making out of the foundation, our signature programs and multi-year grant initiatives, as well as overseeing some work with disaster relief and product donations and community partnerships. So kind of the full range of community activities at Campbell's. I'm based in Camden, New Jersey, which is where our headquarters is. And as you can see from the slide here, we have kind of a range of employee giving and volunteerism programs, really encouraging volunteering kind of year round. And that's actually, been something we've been really trying to push, is I think those, having the dedicated volunteer days and giving days is really important, but also really trying to push for sort of a year-round culture of giving. And so we have our year-round matching program that supports people giving their time and their dollars. And you can see here, a few specific examples that I'm sure we'll go into a little more detail later, but things like our backpack program that we especially roll out across our manufacturing locations. So we have about 30 communities across North America that we support. And then we again have those dedicated volunteer days. We have, I would say, an increased push around skills-based volunteering with sort of varying levels of formality kind of built out. But again, really just a range of programs that really are designed to foster employee choice and allow our employees to connect to their own passion areas and to connect to the passion and the purpose of the company.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thanks, Kate. And Ben, would love to have you share with the team the work that you've done with WeHero.
I'm just here to listen to Kate. I think I'm just supposed to be an attendee, David. I think the panelist was a mistake.
Wait a minute.
I'm Ben Sampson, everybody. I'm a co-founder and CEO over here at WeHero. I got into this space really doing volunteer programs internationally. For example, I was living in Peru at 14,000 feet, doing economic development, and then quickly discovered the world of CSR and ESG. And really got passionate about engagement and volunteerism in companies, how we can do that at scale and maximize impact globally. And so we really focus on working with companies on reaching their engagement targets, how to scale their volunteerism efforts across the globe, and how to maximize impact in doing that. So really excited to be spending time with you all and really excited to hang out with Kate and David today.
All right. So I think to Ben's point as well, this isn't about me, this is about Ben and Kate, but I do want to offer an introduction to myself. So I've been with WiseHive Bright Funds for over 3 years, and I have the opportunity to work with companies around the globe and helping them design and understand their programs and bring their programs to reality. But a little bit about WiseHive, and this really isn't about WiseHive today, but I want to provide some context. So WiseHive is a SaaS solutions provider where we're focused on social good and social impact. And we do that in 3 ways: through our grant making capabilities on our Zengen platform, our employee giving and volunteering capabilities on our Bright Funds platform, and our WeHero capabilities with the volunteering, team building, and engagement experiences. And we continue to make investment in social good capabilities, and we continue to grow our organization and have the amazing opportunity to support over 1,200 organizations across all 3 of these different product lines. But this isn't about me. This is about Kate and Ben. So what I like to do is we've put together a little bit of a structure to garden to offer a kind of organic conversation to learn about what's working and what's working, what opportunities, what your successes have looked like. So to start with, Kate, I know you started with kind of the high level view of your program, but I think one of the things that's amazing about the Campbell Soup program is the legacy of the program. And we have the opportunity to work with so many new tech companies that are launching programs, but you guys come from such a different perspective. Can you talk about the legacy of your program?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Campbell's has been around a very long time. We've been, in Camden, our headquarters city, for over 150 years. And giving and volunteerism has really always been part of the company's DNA and a part of what we do. That said, we, like everyone else, need to adapt to the changing times, and really have had the opportunity over the last, 7 or 8 years, especially, to really reinvent our programs and rethink our programs. And particularly, I would say, a change that we made, really, I guess about 5 years ago, was really thinking about how do we kind of evolve our programs to make them, one, sort of foster more of that employee choice piece that I talked about a few minutes ago, and really make sure that we are kind of making our programs just simple and user-friendly. So, in the past, we had a matching program for dollars for doers, and there was a whole set of parameters around that. And then we had an employee giving program, and there was a whole set of parameters around preferred organizations and a lot of paper forms, frankly, to kind of get your match. And then there was a separate giving campaign and days of service, and it was all, honestly, a little bit disjointed. So I think the big change that we really made, 5 years ago, is to bring it all together in a simplified format and really have one annual match cap for employees that they can then use to match their dollars or their time, however they see fit. And while we have, certainly we will design programs to try to, make that connection to the types of causes that Campbell supports from a grant perspective, right? So not surprisingly, we do a lot of work around food access and nutrition and healthy living, given what we do as a company. But we realize that our employees have a lot of different passion areas and different places where they want to plug in and get involved. So we want to provide both the opportunities to get involved in kind of our signature programs and our grant programs and make that connection to, food access and some of our priorities. But then we also really want to have the opportunity for employees to connect to what matters to them. So really being able to just streamline and simplify the program and say, you can use these matching dollars as you see fit. There's one, really one platform for it. Take out the paper forms. That really has been kind of how we've taken some of those legacy programs, I would say, more into the modern era.
Kate, there's a little bit of divergence, but as we look at some of the questions that we've gotten, what's your personal journey? Because the CSR space and social good space is evolving, and so many people are passionate and they want to get into it. Like, what has your personal journey been in? Because you're like at a level that so many people would love to be at in your space. What's your personal journey been?
Yeah, I do always say, like, there really is not one standard career path to get into this. I sometimes I almost even know what to call, like, CSR, corporate philanthropy,
Right.
Sustainability. Get right. There's also so many. There's not even really a standard job title or name of kind of what this work is. But I would say, right, this whole idea of sort of corporate responsibility, creating shared value as a company for both communities and for the business. There is really not a standard path. So I will share that, my own background is a mix of kind of nonprofit and for-profit. And so to me, kind of bringing that together in this space was kind of a perfect fit. And for me, really a dream job. But, I was a public health major in undergrad. I wound up going into management consulting out of undergrad and working with a variety of different types of companies, many focused on healthcare kind of from all different angles, pharmaceuticals, hospitals, nonprofits. And then from there, went and worked for an organization called the Center for High Impact Philanthropy, which is based at University of Pennsylvania. And then from there, dabbled with honestly a few other in other corporate settings and so a couple tech startups, and then just ultimately was really driven back to this intersection of social impact and business. And so I often joke that I basically stalked my predecessor at Campbell's till there was a role open on her team. And ultimately, then kind of worked my way up into my role today. So, just quickly too, if you look at my team, I've got somebody who came from public radio and media. I have someone who came from higher education, someone who came from an organization, actually not too dissimilar from like a WeHero, or kind of, works with companies to design social impact programs, sort of more on this is a little bit more on the consulting side. So a real variety of even just who makes up my team. And I think that's, I would say a big part of our success too, is we all bring diverse perspectives to be able to do our work.
That's a tough journey to try and follow those footsteps if one wanted to get into this. So Ben, so I would love to have you share a little bit about, kind of how how the WeHero work. But let's start with that. Like, I know you started a little bit on this. What was your journey to get into this? You do amazing engagement work. What was your personal journey if someone wanted to follow that?
Yeah, and I'll start by saying, I love hearing Kate's journey and how the stalking tactic. I love that. But I think, first off, there's so many gaps and challenges in our space. And I think those are some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. So I think there's the avenue of trying to find a role within these companies, but also trying to solve some of the gaps and challenges that folks that are in social impact roles are having. And so mine was, I came across and I ran to a woman that had the title CSR. I had no clue what that was. And she went on and tell me it's corporate social responsibility. I handle basically all the philanthropic efforts at our company. I do the corporate volunteering, the giving, and so on and so forth. And my mind was just blown that there was a job that's what we got to do. I was in management consulting as well at the time and focused on product. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I was living in San Francisco. I started reaching out to all these different CSR professionals to ask them to get coffee. And as many of you know, that are on this webinar, this industry is so friendly and so open. And I had so many people openly accept my invite to get coffee with them and learn about the space. And again, I got into this and totally tripped into this industry. I had so many people telling me that they were really struggling on the volunteer side of things. They're really struggling with, how do we do volunteer programs at scale? How do we make sure they're actually making an impact? How do we bump our engagement numbers for our employees? And having that background in working with so many nonprofits, doing international volunteer work, I never thought there was a career going down that path for me, and figuring out that I can help these companies with their volunteer programs, getting them to connect with some of the nonprofits that I was working with at the time, is kind of how I tripped into this space. And so, I always joke, I fell into this industry, and I think there's a lot of opportunity out there for anybody that's looking to jump in.
So what I'm hearing is management consulting and stalking apparently are the two keys. So for all of you that want to get into this space. All right, let's bring it back. So Kate's offered perspective of what specifically Campbell's is doing. But again, they have a legacy of a century of the kind of community support. When you work with companies that are newer into the volunteering, or trying to make an impact, or trying to create that activation through volunteering, how do you advise clients to launch a committed program? Because companies can come and say, hey, I want a sales event for 15 people, or I want to make a commitment into volunteering. What does that process look like when you work with firms?
First off, that for any companies that are looking at this, seeing the case studies like Campbell's is so effective and beneficial. So I highly encourage you to keep doing that. I spend a lot of my time working with a lot of different companies that are in the size of the Fortune 1000 category. As you can imagine, David, a lot of those are so different in regards to where they're at in their journey and what their goals are for their programs. But I think there's some things that really stand out. I think big picture thinking is absolutely essential when you're thinking about launching a program. I think so often we're thinking about immediate goals of we need a volunteer event for Earth Day, or we want to give back during our sales conference. I think that comes up as like the immediate needs for the year. I think first and foremost, we want to make sure that if we are launching a program, that it can be successful for a very long time and have the legacy that what Kate and Campbell's are doing. And to get that right support and that right kind of engagement. And that means working with companies to evaluate what I think of just like a few of the following bullets, like, does the program align with the business goals? I think this is really key. What are the defined goals and objectives of this program? How do we build transparency and accountability into the program? What is the time commitment for this program? What I mean by time commitment, like, are we building a program for the next 5 years, the next 10 years? What does that look like? And then what are the engagement goals for the program and how can we ensure the success? So I think that taking a step back and looking at the goals of the business and the goals of the program are absolutely essential. I'm happy to jump in and talk about like, what elements of that look like, but that's just to kick us off, like some of the big picture thinking I really encourage companies to go in with.
Well, it's interesting you use the term event is different than a program. And like, so, talk about that, because I think you're right. It's like, I mean, firms are looking for events, but there's a difference between an event and a program. And how would you differentiate that?
Yeah, I think programs like the long-term thinking of how are we going to utilize and engage our ERGs, our staff to like build these programs that actually scale, where it's not like just our, small CSR team consistently trying to launch volunteer events and create these opportunities. That's a lot of work and it takes a lot of time, especially if you have a global company with, 10,000 plus employees. I mean, we work with companies that have 100,000 plus employees. How do you actually do that at scale? So that's where I kind of refer to like the program, David. It's not like a 500 person volunteer event. It's a program that can scale where we can activate employees. We can make sure we're building, ambassadors within the organization that can take those efforts out to their own divisions of the company and making sure we're measuring and reporting on that so we can constantly adjust that program moving forward. And so, and happy to get into any part of that as well.
So a point that both of you brought up is about engagement. And again, Kate, I'm going to call out, there's differences in the business that you guys have than a lot of other companies. First of all, to provide the context, what is the demographic of the workforce? And then if we could kind of unpack, like, how are you effectively creating engagement? And I know nothing's perfect, but like what does that look like for you, starting with the demographics?
Yeah. So we have, a pretty, I think every company has a diverse demographic, but we often think about it in terms of, just how our employees sort of interact with, each other and kind of in the workforce in terms of, office-based, manufacturing-based, and then kind of remote and field-based. Right. So we have, and actually the majority of our employees actually are in our manufacturing facilities, right, making our product.
Yep.
And that, has definitely been a challenge. I mean, I think I'll be honest in saying historically our programs really were looking at our salaried workforce and really were not necessarily as much taking into account our hourly frontline employees. And so that's been a really big push for my team, is to really, like, it's really a matter of equity in a lot of ways, right? Of really thinking about, hey, we do describe these as company-wide program. Let's make sure that they are really company-wide. So it really is just a lot of, listening to our different stakeholders, meeting people where they are, realizing that it's not going to look the same in an office versus a manufacturing facility versus someone who's a field salesperson. Right. So a lot of kind of listening and adapting and being willing to be flexible is definitely a big part of it. And then it's also really around creating local champions. And, kind of Ben references too, right? It's like a lot of CSR teams, mine included, are pretty small. We have a team of 4, right? And so we're certainly not going to be able to cover 30. And again, I would say like many companies are even bigger than this, right? We have 30 locations. Are we going to be able to single-handedly or sort of personally run events and programs at all those locations? No. So it's our job to both kind of build things that can be scaled and replicated and have sort of easy instructions and ways to engage, and then to kind of build those local champions at our other offices and plant sites who can then execute. We can give that support, we can provide those toolkits, right? We can answer questions, but we can't do it all ourselves. So really thinking about the local champion piece, and then just really the willingness to adapt our programs to meet different needs of different stakeholder groups.
All right. And I'm sure speakers love hearing this. I'm going to go off script a little bit, but I want to bring that point back to Ben. So Ben, with the companies, again, different, the opportunity, you're working with dozens or hundreds of companies. How does engagement, what does that connection look like successfully in the clients that you work with?
What does like engagement look like successfully?
Engagement, yeah.
I think there's a few key things, or I would say like a few key elements as I like think about, David, just like the hundreds of companies that we might work with that create like a really successful program. One of those being like engaging employees at the earliest stage. This means like when new hires come in, activating them with the volunteer experience and educating them about the social impact efforts at your company. So great to do that right when an employee comes in, because our goal is that, hey, we get them excited about volunteering, we get them excited about social impact at our company. And maybe if we get them excited enough, they'll be ambassadors for our programs moving forward and continue to actively participate. So that early engagement, I think, is important. I think campaigning aggressively to get leadership buy-in. We know that this is a thorn for so many programs. And so campaigning, what I mean by that is it can be really hard to get leadership buy-in or executive buy-in for these programs. I say campaigning because I encourage companies to go as high up as you can and keep campaigning, whether that's the VP of development, the VP of marketing, for example, and getting them bought in and using them to help you get upwards, towards the top. I think that's really, really critical. I think working really closely with ERGs to understand what employees care about and empowering them to do volunteer experiences for their company, engage their employees, really, really powerful there. Aligning the program as much as possible with the business goals. Again, I touched on that, but that's really critical and a huge element for creating a successful program. Tracking and measuring engagement and impact is absolutely critical as well. I think, for companies that are launching these programs, having the data to report back on what that ROI is critical to continue getting budget, to continue growing and expanding the programs. And I think having amazing volunteer experiences that can reach your employees with their time constraints, huge element as well. I love how Kate's thinking about and talking about how we reach our frontline employees, the employees that are doing different kinds of work, the employees that aren't behind a laptop like you and I are right now. I think thinking about formats and how we create really meaningful experiences for them in unique ways is something that's going to keep them coming back and continue to engage with your company in these programs. So just a few of the key elements that stand out to me, David, and like what makes a program really, really successful.
That's awesome. I think Kate's even taking notes on this. So Kate, you had mentioned small team, and I think that's the reality of a lot of our clients. How do you, because you're on the foundation side, where's that line drawn between the foundation side and the HR team, and how do you guys work together to deliver, what your mission?
Yeah. Well, so we are, I will say, as a corporate foundation, very much integrated into the company, right? So, my role is sort of dual role, right? Two hats as sort of leader of the foundation, leader of community affairs, aligned goals, aligned visions, right? Foundation is just sort of one of the ways in which we kind of fund the work and support the work. But, working closely with HR has been a really important push. And I would say, especially just over the last few years, as we really are trying to, when you kind of come back to this idea of sort of where does it align with sort of company strategy, right? Like, I think oftentimes we're kind of put in that category. We often talk about as Campbell's, as sort of like, how do we deliver on the promise of our purpose, right? And that's often where you think about a lot of the community work, and it's absolutely there. But we also have a strategic focus area as a company around building a winning team and culture. Right. And that to me needs to not just be HR, right? We are all responsible for that. And our community programs are a huge part of building that sense of belonging, right? That sense of engagement and culture that we're trying to, continue to build at Campbell's. So, just trying to figure out sort of who are the different stakeholders to work with in HR. And that can be challenging, right? That's a much bigger organization than mine, right? So figuring out, where do we connect on the performance management side? We have, a team who's revamping new hire orientation, right? To Ben's point, like, how do we make sure we're plugging in and are part of that new hire conversation? Like, I invite myself to a lot of conversations and a lot of meetings. And you just kind of have to insert yourself sometimes. And really make it clear, because again, I think that's where back to sort of also like the business case piece, which I know is sort of a theme a lot in this conversation, is, when you sort of really connect back to that employee engagement, retention, piece attraction piece of the puzzle, right? That's really, really core to being able to continue to grow the program.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So a lot of what we've talked about is kind of, and Kate, you mentioned this before in terms of a kind of comprehensive program. And this is, kind of the journey you guys went through was bits and pieces of a program until you wove it all together. We at Wise, I believe that a comprehensive, as I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, that a comprehensive solution includes, grant making, employee giving, volunteering, engagement programs, and putting it all under, one robust, comprehensive program. I want to start with you, Kate. Like, I know you mentioned at the beginning of the call, everyone's on a journey, right? Everyone starts somewhere and everyone continues on a kind of a spectrum or progression of, I would say, maturity, but that sounds judgmental. Like, what was your guys' progression in terms of capabilities for engagement, capabilities for, supporting the community, supporting employees? And then what does it look like in 3-5 years?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, again, like our programs, I think kind of had, maybe again, this is a little bit in terms of what Ben was talking about, of sort of like events versus programs. I think historically it was a little bit more just sort of like event based, or sort of like micro program, right? And so again, everything was like a little bit disjointed, and it was all there, but it wasn't sort of a cohesive story about, employee community engagement for our employees and what that looks like. And so, a few things I think also like prompted the shift for us. One was just responding to changing demographics and an increasingly young employee population, and people just asking, right, and sort of demanding more of the programs, which is great. And to say like, well, hey, like, why can I only give to these few organizations, or why is there used to have a minimum $100 gift to get a match? And it's like, again, talk about equity and accessibility of the programs. Like, why is that? It's like, right. So it took also sometimes our team and employees like questioning some of the parameters around the programs and why they were there. We also had a big growth in our employee base with an acquisition of another company. And so all of a sudden we had, even more manufacturing facilities to support, more locations to support. And again, it was like, we really have to, simplify this and make sure that we've got, competitive offerings in this area. So, that really prompted, I think, a lot of the change and the thinking. And then, I think in terms of like where it's evolving, I think the overall structure that we have today makes a lot of sense, but it's building out now, I think, even more robustly some specific pieces. So like skills-based volunteering, right? And having a little bit more of a structured way to offer opportunities for employees to use their skill set to, help build the capacity of all the wonderful nonprofits in our communities, and to really, think about connecting that to their individual development plans, right? So I'm trying to develop, maybe further develop a certain skill. What a great opportunity to take on a consulting project, with a nonprofit partner. I'm going to really like keep building that skill. I'm going to sort of demonstrate to my manager, I've got, an area, right? So again, that's like one of those HR connections. So I think the skills-based volunteering piece, both to benefit our employees and to benefit our communities is a one that we'll continue to build out. We've talked about kind of formalizing more around board service, as well as sort of a form, I think about, as a form of skills-based volunteering, and then continuing to just really think about those opportunities for our hourly workforce. I think those are some of the priorities for us going forward. So there's always opportunities to build and grow. I think, especially once you feel like you have that solid foundation for the program.
Foundation.
Foundation
So
for the foundation.
No, it's clearly, if you look at anybody that's doing programs, you have that foundation. So when you guys do volunteering activities, how do you tie in employee giving and grant making? Are those synonymous? Are they combined? Sorry, I'm going to surprise you with questions.
Yeah. So, one way we directly incorporate the employee giving piece is that when employees volunteer, they have the opportunity to use the volunteer match. So for every hour that they volunteer, $10 to the organization, right? So, again, they don't have to use their annual match cap that way, but that's an opportunity, right? So that's one way that we directly connect the volunteerism piece to the giving piece. And I think it's great because it has a couple, I think, well, more than a couple, but a few like key benefits. One is understanding and recognizing that for many of our nonprofits, volunteerism is not free, right? They're often really going their way to accommodate our volunteer groups. And so finding a way to kind of compensate them too, and make sure that we're making it worth their while is really important. And then it's a huge incentive for getting employees to track their time, right? So if they know that when they track their volunteer time, they can get that, that volunteer match for the organization they volunteered with. When we set our volunteer hours goals, like one of the biggest challenges is getting people to log the hours and track the time. So we have that data, right? So we often talk about that I think, I don't know that the data would bear out that if people didn't have the volunteer match, they wouldn't volunteer, but would they actually volunteer and then track the time?
And exactly. Tracking the time. It's not the action. It's not the participation. It's the action of tracking it.
And telling us, right? There's a lot that goes on that we don't know about. So, and again, that obviously has that important benefit of providing the financial support, even in small amounts, but it adds up to the nonprofit community as well.
So a question on the question from the chat conversation, which is relevant here. So when employees do that participation, do you require sign off from the nonprofit of that employee's participation when they're reporting their time?
Yeah, so we don't ask the nonprofits to sign off. We ask employees to sign off. So sometimes we might have, we can set up like a large, volunteer event, in the portal, and then, there's 30 people who are signed up, but then they need to go in and say like, yes, I was there, right? Because they might have been signed up and then something changed in their schedule. So it's really more on the employee side. I think, just versus kind of asking, again, putting more burden on the nonprofit to have to share back a list. I think, we kind of make that, it's obviously a bit of an honor system, right? But to have employees kind of self-certify they were there, or yes, I was there, but it wasn't 3 hours, it was 2 hours, or whatever that may be.
Yeah. And when I work with clients as well, that's the behavior we see. We're asking the employee to, sometimes they'll ask the employee to assign an online signing of a form to attest their attendance, but otherwise it's the honor system. And Ben, is kind of Kate alluded to in this how these things feed into each other. What, I guess, when you work with clients, what do you see the volunteering activity driving into corporate grants, driving into employee donations? How do you see those things kind of intersecting and connecting to each other?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think they're 100% related. I mean, I think our data here is amazing too. We know, just like looking back through like 5 years of like WeHero history, that if employees volunteer, they're 2.2 times more likely to donate to that nonprofit that they volunteer for. But here's like the crazy metric that's mind blowing to me. If they did that volunteer program for that nonprofit, not only are they 2.2 times more likely to donate, on average, they're donating 10 times as much money. Like that's mind blowing. So like I think the relationship is really strong. And so, when we work with nonprofits, when we work with companies, we really want to think about that holistically. Like, we're not just talking about volunteering and activation. We're talking about why that investment's important because of what it can create in regards to a cause and effect on the giving side of things as well. And so I think that's something that's really exciting, and it's very exciting that the data is supporting that, especially as we get more and more data and research around this. Does that answer your question, David?
Yeah, but let me pause that. So Kate, is that what you see in practicality?
Yeah, so we definitely see a similar link where, I think it just creates that, that loyalty to the organizations that people are volunteering with. And so, we often are, wind up seeing that people are kind of giving to, and often it's honestly giving to the same organizations that they're also volunteering with kind of on their own time and on their weekends, right? But generally that's, when we look at the data sort of who people are giving to, that is generally how it looks. And I think that connection is important. And then we often kind of bring that back to then when we do, a giving campaign, we can then sort of like set up, a fund to sort of give to some of the organizations that we've volunteered with in a given community, and then kind of allow employees to kind of, if they want to participate, but they're not exactly sure who to give to. It's like, hey, consider giving to this group of Camden organizations that are some of our, long-term partners and that we volunteer with. And again, it just sort of makes, it's also just more tangible, right? They know who they're giving to. And so we see really high kind of utilization of the promotion of those funds that connect back to, the partners, either that we, again, work with on volunteerism or that we also, give grants to. So we see a lot of that connection on the corporate grant making side too.
Yeah, Ben, is that, yeah, go ahead.
I just think, from a high level, when we think about why this is happening, it's just built so much trust with the employee. I think when we started WeHero, we were looking at consumer giving was dropping about 1% per year. And the biggest reason for that was a trust factor. And we're like, there's so many incredible nonprofit organizations out there. Like, we can do our work to build awareness for these nonprofits and build trust around these nonprofits. And that's proven to work really well. So I think just the trust factor there is incredibly important.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, we can talk about building programs and being successful and effective. But Ben, when you bring these programs to companies, there's a big excitement and enthusiasm in year one. And like, what do the barriers look like for bringing a program in? And I think they're creating that sustainability. And I know, Kate, I'm going to keep going to the legacy of Campbell's, but what do you do? What are the things that you see that are barriers, and how do you overcome them?
I think a few barriers that I think that are top of mind right now and occurring in a lot of companies. A huge one's time. People are so sensitive about the time they're investing in programs, and not as many employees are going, I have 4 hours or 8 hours to like do a volunteer program. And so time sensitivity, we're noticing becoming an increasing obstacle. I'm thinking about volunteer formats that are high impact that can be done in short, time periods is something we're thinking about for engaging more employees and companies. Again, I talked about this before, but a huge obstacle continues to be leadership buy-in. Happy to talk again about campaigning. I think another thing, we get into a lot of companies that have been doing programs and making changes to programs over the years. And a big question we get is, how do we re-engage disengaged employees? And what I mean by that is, like, an employee went through a volunteer event, felt like it was busy work, and disengaged from the process. I didn't have a good time. This wasn't worth my time. I'm not going to sign up for that Earth Day campaign. I'm not going to jump onto that CSR platform. How do we re-engage those employees? So that's something that we see quite often. So some ideas, I'm not going to be like, here's the challenges. Some ideas of like how we're seeing this get resolved. Meeting people where they are in terms of volunteering. Kate touched about this again, about like, we have employees that are in so many different job types and have so many different time constraints. We need to be thoughtful of that and think about the kind of volunteer experiences that we can offer them, experiences that could be done at home, experiences that could be done within 10 to 15 minutes during a lunch break, experiences that could be done in a virtual environment. For example, I just did a volunteer event where I was helping, people that are struggling with visual impairment and helping, people find the bus stop, all through my phone, all within like 10 minutes. And we need to think about those formats and start offering more of those to our employees that are doing that. Again, leadership buying, tough, campaigning to the top. When we start working with companies on campaigning and having that mindset, we're seeing more and more engagement. We're seeing more and more buy-in, and eventually we starting to get really good leadership buy-in as well. How do we re-engage the disengaged employees? So challenging to do. I call this employee activations. Taking an event that's already occurring where that employee's at and embedding volunteering inside of it. Take a sales conference or a sales meeting, for example. Hey, everybody, we're going to take a break, and for 30 minutes, we're going to build a water filter. This one water filter is going to give 12 people clean water for 10 years. And just giving them that taste and that ability to re-engage in a volunteer program in a very curated way, we're seeing a huge success rate in getting people back and engaged into the program, re-engaged on the platform through some of those methods. And so, again, some of the key obstacles we're noticing, David, there, and then some ways that we're noticing companies tackle those.
Yeah. And then, so Kate, I know, again, I keep going back to the legacy. Like, what are the barriers and challenges that you have? I know you've got the demographics of the workforce, you've got folks in the field. I know you've already touched on some of this.
Yeah. I mean, definitely some of them have come up. I mean, I think the kind of the data and reporting one can be a real barrier, right? I mean, again, like, often, the engagement is happening, employees are participating. How do you get them to actually tell them what you're doing, especially because we do also track like the volunteerism outside of work piece. And that, I think that's even harder, right? It's one thing if it's a big team event happening, during office hours. So that reporting piece is hard. And I think the reason it matters comes back to like, how do you tell the story, right? And how do you show the impact? right? And you have to have the data to be able to show that. The other one that's been challenging for us too is like not only just collecting the data on, number of volunteer hours, things like that, but then connecting it back to employee engagement at Campbell's, right? Like we can lean on the data that's out there and very compelling. And I think that tells the story. But like, if you can get a few questions in your employee engagement survey and be able to track that over time, right? And tell the story specific to your company, again, that just can be a challenge. But I think if you can get that, that's fantastic. And then, I do think the thinking about those different, workforces and thinking about the hourly piece where, again, it's what Ben's talking about meeting people where they are and finding the different ways to make it work. When you have employees who are, on the line, paid by the hour, can't step away to volunteer, how do you create those, those short experience on a break time? Or, again, I think it does link back to this idea of embedding it in existing events. And a big piece for us with that hourly workforce is connecting the internal community building to the external community building, right? So you're doing a company barbecue to get, families and get people together and help people connect, internally. Can you add sort of a give back component, a volunteer event, something to that? So really making that connection of when we're talking about community building, we're really thinking about internal and external community.
That's amazing, and we're seeing a lot of that. And this is not intended to be a commercial, but with our broader clients, we're seeing much more. How can we extend our program outside of our employee population to either include retirees or including customers, friends, family, vendors in our overall impact? And we're seeing a considerable increase in that as well. I think so, and this may sound stereotypical, so I'll ask you, you're going to be the expert. When you have a field worker or someone on the production floor, is that human, given their compensation, their socioeconomic situation, are they more likely to volunteer or donate? Or is that something you even track? Don't mean to put you on the spot. Yeah.
I would say probably a little more likely to volunteer, but it's a mix. And that's, again, that's where this employee choice piece comes back to say, like, look, first of all, when we also are tracking employee giving and we're doing a campaign, we are increasingly focusing less on dollars and more on participation, right? Any amount helps really. And that's a really important point, right? You want to be really sensitive to people's, situations, and that not everybody, also thinking about like the time of year, right? Not everybody has the same ability to give at the same time of year or the same amount. And so just really thinking about just emphasizing participation and that you can participate in a lot of different ways. And we even actually incorporated a new category of our volunteers in which we call an active care. So it's not necessarily like a typical, volunteer activity, but maybe it's you gave blood, you brought in a present to put under the Christmas tree for the toy drive, right? It's not a volunteering hour per se, right? But it's an active care, it's an active giving, and that to just really say like that really matters too, and that's important, and that's part of the culture again that we're trying to build.
It's an everyday action.
Yeah.
Yep. Love that. Ben, would love to get your perspective. But what do you see in terms of kind of the different demographics of the employees and how that drives engagement? How can you best support them?
I agree with Kate. We see a much stronger leaning towards the volunteer side of things in a lot of those cases, and it varies company to company. I think it's what's unfortunate, David, honestly, is like we see a lot of companies that just don't try to engage those employees, which can be really frustrating to see and watch. We really try to encourage that and create programs that make that really easy to do. It's been a huge focus for us. And so, I would agree so wholeheartedly with Kate, and, kind of like those everyday actions, I think are absolutely critical. Again, figuring out formats and timelines that work for these folks. Even, we have experiences like that people can take home and do with their families, like in their kitchens. Right. And so we think we spend a lot of our time thinking about that because it's a huge part of the employee base for a lot of companies, and we can really impact engagement and impact metrics that way.
And so I'm talking about metrics, and Aaron just asked this question from UNC Health. How do you track these everyday actions, Kate? And I believe this is an industry. I think that we're shifting as an industry.
Yeah.
But what do you track them? Do you measure them? What do you? How do you
Yeah,
talk
we
about
do.
that?
So right now we track them the same way that we do right now. When you go to sort of like log your time in some way, right? It says like there are categories of, skills-based volunteering, traditional volunteering, board service, acts of care. So part of it is we're doing a campaign around like, what is that and why does it matter and why do we care, right? So part of it is like, you have to spread the word first of like, this is something we're tracking and that we care about. And then also we have really, especially in our plant communities, found frankly, we've had to just look at technology workarounds for tracking. So for example, they're hosting a blood drive, like just have somebody from HR do a sign-in sheet and then somebody can just bulk upload,
Nice,
right? So you're not asking
nice.
every employee to individually, after they give blood, go log it, or they put a present under the tree, right? They've listed their name when they drop it off. We now have that. We can capture it. Either our team or someone, from HR at the plant can kind of bulk upload that at once. So that's where we're, it's the meeting people where they are. It's, maybe a little bit more like hand holding than we used to do, but I think it's really important, right? And we have to make sure that we're, especially for our employees that are, don't have the company issued devices, aren't sitting in front of a computer. They're not going to just, they're likely not going to track their own time, but they might, track, just kind of write their name down, share that they participated, and then we can kind of capture that in the system.
I love that. Shifting a little bit in terms of the workers and workforce, and we've gone through a pretty substantive post-COVID shift in workplace, offices, the notion of hybrid workers. I'm going to start with Ben. Like, what are you seeing, and how does that impact engagement rates, operational execution, program design? What are you seeing? What are your clients coming to you with, and how are you solving?
Hybrid's a huge keyword.
Is this for real? This is where we're going to be in 5 years? Like, what? That may be a whole new, scratch that, because that might be a whole other webinar. But
I wish I knew the answer, David. Yeah. I think companies are trying to figure that out candidly. What does this look like in 5 years? We're all trying to figure that out. What we've noticed is the companies that are finding success, they're building a lot of flexibility into their programs. So when we think about volunteer execution, flexibility in regards to where those programs can be completed and how they can get done. Back to my point on format, like having 3 or 4 different kinds of volunteer formats that we know are successful, know our employees enjoy, and know we can reach every kind of demographic for our employee base. It has been where we're seeing companies find a huge amount of success. There's formats that work really well for both the remote employees and the in-office employees in that hybrid format. We've also noticed that there's a noticeable eagerness from the remote staff to do volunteering engagement because they are isolated in some way. They aren't in office.
Great point.
And so we've noticed that as well. And I think, just looking at the time, there was definitely some economic challenges for a number of companies with a number of layoffs at the beginning of this year. As we look at historical data, if we go back to 2008, we noticed a very nice spike in volunteer hours during that time period. And we're noticing the same today across companies. And so I'm kind of rambling and going in a couple different directions here, but just given the time that we're at now and where things are going, the companies that are finding the greatest success, they're building in and thinking about flexibility in their programs and how they can develop formats that reach their entire employee base.
Hey, Kate, how did COVID affect you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I'll be honest, right? We had set some pretty ambitious volunteer hour goals in like early 2020. And so, we saw a dip for sure, during the pandemic, right? I mean, we definitely were able, with partners like WeHero to do some engagement, for people remotely, but like we definitely just saw that, it was different, right? It was a dip. And we've been sort of working our way back kind of in the meantime. And I feel now like there was a lot of like pent up excitement and demand. And so when people are back in the office, they're really excited to kind of do the in-person volunteering again. But then there also are, to your point about like, I think there will be companies that will probably remain remote, or at least, mainly remote. And then we also have, as I mentioned earlier, a portion of our workforce that just always works that way, right? Our field-based sales teams and other remote employees. And so the challenge that we see with them too is like just being able to offer a variety, because sometimes, yes, people are going to want something that they can just do like from their home. It's still a way to engage. They feel good, but we'll often hear from people too, like, I spend a lot of time in my home office. I want to get out in the community, right? And so it's important to provide, I think, that, that option too. And so one thing we've done is say like, hey, well, we have a connection with Feeding America. There are food banks in all of our communities. Like, we can help make those connections and suggestions, say like, go out with your family. And again, it's not always going to be with your colleagues if you're not co-located in the same town or city, but find those ways to kind of get out with your family, and not just sort of be behind your desk all the time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. The and we call them activation events. We see those as well, where it's you have a remote workforce or hybrid workforce. How do you get them to come back into the office? And having these amazing volunteering events in the office was a really good rallying cry to bringing folks together. I know, Ben, you guys crush that with your events. I don't mean to take your thunder. All right. I knew this was going to happen. I wanted to keep talking, but I know we do need to honor the time. So we're supposed to allow 10 minutes at the end for questions, but I want to do one question to each of you before we go to the attendees' questions. This is one win. So Kate, what's one specific program that's either outperformed others? Like, what was amazing? Maybe it was those people I met in a restaurant in Toledo. Like, what's one win? And then same thing for you, Ben, but Kate first.
So it's so hard. One. Okay, I'm gonna cheat and I'm gonna give two. One is like, I would say my one win of just sort of overall was that consolidating the kind of matching program into one, right? I think that was just a big win and a big success to say, like, we're not going to have separate programs for all these different things. You've got one annual match cap. You can use it how you want, choice model, right? So I would say that's my high level, like, one program win. I would say one, an area of a specific type of volunteerism and engagement that we have found hugely successful has been times where we could bring the community into our building and really kind of have a uniquely Campbell experience for the community that also engages our employees. And I think it's a win for several reasons, and I'll give an example, but it's a win because I'll be honest, even with salaried employees who have more flexibility, it's sometimes hard to get people out of the building in the middle of the workday, right? So you're bringing people, into our building. So it has the benefit of being easy for our employees. It has the benefit for the external community of sort of demystifying a little bit sometimes the corporate setting, right? And you're behind these gates sometimes, right, as we are in an office park. And so just like inviting the community in is a really important signal. And then it's something that we can uniquely offer. So in the cases of, we're a food company, we have a consumer test kitchen. We have some really awesome show kitchens where our chefs experiment with different recipes. And so we bring students in and do culinary education for elementary school students. So it's a really meaningful way for our employees to engage with those students. And then it's really cool for them to, kind of be inside a food company and literally see how the soup is made.
I think you've used that line before. So I know we're going to continue on questions. You are seeing a survey pop up. EFG would love to hear feedback on the overall value of the conversation. So if you would take a moment to respond to the poll questions, it's greatly appreciated. So Ben, to you, what just an amazing, I mean, you and I have shared so many amazing stories on the programs you've run. What the highlight?
I have too many. I'll share one because I think it aligns with like a lot of the stuff that we're discussing today. It could be like a good case study of an example. It's a company called Sylvamo. They are a massive, one of the largest paper providers across the globe. And they have, offices in Brazil, France, the US, everywhere you can imagine. And what they did is they wanted to build a volunteer program that aligned around their business goals, obviously, that they could reach all their different international locations, and that they could reach all of their employees as well with different formats. They decided to focus 100% on education. And the way that they deploy this program is they do an annual day of service, and then people can continue volunteering after that. And the goal is to get every single one of their employees the opportunity to be activated around the cause. Yeah. And what I love about it is that they take a hyper-localized approach to this. So all the local schools that are underserved in every single one of these communities in every country that they're operating in was supported through the efforts. The ability for them to activate and resource every single one of their ERGs and divisions of the company in all those different countries was super well executed. And I think the exciting part about doing that activation at that level was seeing the results after that, and the number of employees that are engaging throughout the rest of the year as a result around these opportunities, and continuing to go and be
Priming the
volunteers in their communities, at those schools, all wrapped around that, like that core focus that Silvama has, which is supporting education. And so I can go into so much detail there, but just for the sake of time, quick example of just companies out there that are just doing a great job and doing it really, really well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's like priming the pump. Once they've made those connections with the organizations, they know who to talk to. They're going to be more likely to follow on actions. And I know we're really tight on time, and my apologies. So let me ask a couple of just rapid fire questions from the attendees. We have a lot of nonprofits that are attending today, this conversation. Both of you guys. Kate, how do you select the nonprofits? Is there opportunities for folks to introduce themselves to you? Ben, similarly with the catalog of events that you guys have, the nonprofits you work with, how does, maybe it's 3 minutes isn't enough here. How do nonprofits get connected with corporate actions like what both of you guys are doing? Kate, you want to go first?
Yeah, well, I mean, generally, we really are focusing on the communities where we have our operations. So we, rely a lot on the organizations that our employees volunteer with, right, in their hometown communities. And that's how I would say the majority of organizations find us. Right. It's a little bit unique in Camden, right, again, where we've been here such a long time, and we just have a lot of organizations that we know and have worked with for years. But, we have new organizations who we start volunteering with every year, right? So it's really just a lot of it is through our employees. A lot of it is, sometimes organizations will reach out directly to me, but generally, again, really focusing on sort of our hometown communities and getting people kind of out in a very, very localized way.
And Ben, how do you approach it?
Yeah, to any nonprofits that are interested in working with us, we're constantly working with nonprofits, building out new volunteer experiences. We're open to any conversation with the nonprofit. Reach out to us on our website. We'd love to learn about your programs, what you're doing, and really how we can be of support. We know a lot of nonprofits are short-staffed and have a tough time also like handling and hosting corporate groups in some cases. And so us being a resource where we can help do a lot of that work for you is something we also try to offer and be that connective tissue between companies and nonprofits. So please reach out, always open to a conversation.
Awesome. And to that, so we've got a couple of successful volunteering program points that the team put together to share with you. These are included in the slides. We're not going to review it. After the presentation tomorrow, you'll receive a recording of the discussion as well as the slides. And with that, I think we're at time. Kate, always amazing to speak with you. So appreciative of the work you guys are doing and your time today. Ben, amazing to see you again. Thank you so much for your share out. Allie, do you?
That was fabulous. I also like the amount of laughs that you had throughout. That is a really good addition. For
I really like what I do for a living.
That's wonderful. Well, Ben, David, Kate, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your lessons, the kind of the high level advice, but also some of the tactical pieces of the day-to-day of how people can implement. I think that's really important. You can see the results on your screen. The webinar survey came in, and then Joanne wants these 1 hour a week for like a month straight on a specific topic. So I think we hit the nail on the head. So to everybody that joined us today, thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you at another Engage for Good webinar. And also, if you like content like this, mark your calendars because we are headed to, I'm going to drop it in the chat, to Minneapolis next year for our annual conference, the 14th through the 16th. And there's a button on that website where it'll literally add to your calendar. So David, Kate, Ben, thank you so much. And everybody have a wonderful, Friday and then a wonderful weekend.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone.